Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to peel back the layers on a legal standard that affects millions of families, the best interests of the child. Now, it sounds simple, right? But it's actually one of the most complex and consequential ideas in all of family law. The entire family court system is basically built on this one idea. But as this quote shows, it's a massive double-edged sword. It's supposed to be a shield for children, but, in the wrong hands, it can easily become a weapon. So, how is that even possible? How can one rule be both a shield and a weapon? Well, to get to the bottom of this, we've got to first look at what the rule is supposed to do. What's the ideal here? All right, so on paper, the best interest standard, it seems like a no-brainer, right? The perfect solution. It's really presented as this comprehensive, kind of gold standard for putting kids first.
And the goal, look, it's a noble one. Judges are supposed to look at the big picture, the whole shebang, and make the best possible choice for a child's future, not for the parents.
So, to help a judge make that call, laws usually give them a list of factors to consider, kind of like the ones you see here. But what's really interesting is that these factors, well, they represent a huge shift in how the law even thinks about this stuff. I mean, think about it. We went from a system where kids were literally considered the property of their father to one that automatically favored mothers. And now we have our current, much more flexible, gender-neutral standard. But in trying to fix one problem, this new standard, well, it kind of created a whole new one. Yeah, so right when this new standard started taking over in the 70s, legal experts were already pointing out a massive flaw at its very core. And here it is. The standard's biggest strength, the fact that it's so flexible, is also its single greatest weakness. A judge can literally consider everything, but the law doesn't tell them how to weigh any of it. There's no formula. It's kind of like what the slide says about obscenity, right? Everyone thinks they know it when they see it, but good luck trying to define it clearly. There's no objective metric, no scorecard a judge can use to just add up the points and voila, best interest. The whole thing is totally subjective. And this right here, this is the heart of the problem. I mean, if two different judges can look at the exact same family, the same set of facts, and come to completely opposite conclusions, well, that means the outcome might have more to do with the judge you get than the actual facts of your case. And you can imagine, that makes it incredibly difficult to appeal a decision. Okay, so this vagueness, it's not just some abstract legal debate for scholars. It has very real consequences. It opens the door to real-world harm, and frankly, it lets personal biases creep in and shape these life-altering decisions. Yeah, think of it like this. Best interests is just a big, stretchy container, and what gets stuffed inside really depends on who's holding it. The facts themselves don't change, but the story you tell about them, that can change everything. So the narrative, the story, becomes way more important than the facts. Take a look. A parent who's just trying to set safety boundaries can be painted as uncooperative. A clear history of domestic abuse gets watered down to high conflict, which makes it sound like both people are equally at fault. And a completely normal trauma response, that gets twisted into emotional instability. And this vagueness is particularly dangerous at the very beginning of a case. You see, a judge might make a super quick, temporary decision, just for the sake of stability, but then time passes and that temporary setup slowly becomes the new normal. And later on, judges are really hesitant to change it, again, citing stability. So a rushed, maybe even flawed decision made in a hurry can lock in a child's entire future. So because the rule is so wide open, it doesn't just allow for bias, it practically invites manipulation. And this happens with very specific language and tactics. And here they are. These are some of the big ones, the buzzwords that can completely hijack a case. Once a label like parental alienation or high conflict shows up in, say, an expert's report, it can just take over the whole story, completely shutting down any deeper look at what's really going on. And, this is where money can make a huge difference. Someone with more resources can literally go expert shopping, hiring one professional after another until they find someone who gives them the opinion they want. And the court might just see that hired gun's opinion as neutral, objective evidence, when it's anything but. Okay, so, knowing all this, how on earth do you navigate this messy reality? Well, the key isn't really to fight the system head-on. It's to work within it, using its own language to your advantage. All right, step one is you have to speak the system's language. Find the official best interest factors for your state. They're right there in the law. Then you organize every single piece of your evidence under those official headings. This forces the judge to see how your real life situation fits squarely into their legal framework. It makes your story much harder to ignore. Okay, next up, your goal is to drag the conversation away from these fuzzy, subjective labels and back to cold, hard facts. When you hear a buzzword, don't just let it hang there. Challenge it. Ask for a definition. Demand specific, observable behaviors. Force the expert to justify every single one of their conclusions. And then you got to dig into their methods. A recommendation can sound really official and authoritative, but it might completely fall apart if you poke at it a little. Ask those tough questions. What records did you actually review? Did you see the police reports? How much time did you really spend with the child? By asking this stuff, you can expose sloppy work and force them to back up their vague opinions with a transparent, solid process. At the end of the day, the most powerful thing you can do is understand this. Best interests is not a fact, it's a frame. It's a narrative container. And in this system, the person who tells the most compelling story, one that's grounded in the system's own rules and language, is often the one who wins.
And that leaves us with a really tough question, doesn't it? I mean, if the so-called gold standard for protecting kids is this full of holes, what does that say about the system itself? Now, that's a heavy question, but it's one we have to ask. Pointing out the flaws in this foundational rule, that isn't about tearing down the system. It's about pushing for something better, more transparency, more accountability, and ultimately, true justice for children and families.